What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and as promised, I was going to make a Pathfinder 2e video. This is going to be a little bit disjointed, but I'll kind of give you an idea up front about what's going on. So first of all, yes, I have played Pathfinder 2e. I've done a session 0 and 2 actual sessions within the game itself, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the game, my thoughts on it, as well as show off a little bit about my character, and then tell you a little bit about what we're playing and things like that. So first of all, we're playing Abomination Vaults is the adventure that we're playing. And if that sounds familiar to you as a 5e player, you may recall that earlier, I think it was last year, we had seen that Pathfinder is actually making Abomination Vaults for 5e, which was kind of the first time we'd seen something like that, where a lot of us, myself included at the time, were like, is Pathfinder like sinking? Are they giving up on their own game and making 5e content because it's the better way to do it? Now, obviously, that was before the OGL, and Pathfinder sold out of all their books like crazy because the OGL kind of pushed everybody over to Pathfinder instead. And if I want, I'll have a link in the video description for this as well. But if you head over to the Abomination Vaults page on the Paizo store, you can see the compilation. Here's the special edition of 5e. Here's the standard edition of 5e, and a bunch of other stuff here. However, it is still not set to launch until the 24th of April of next year. So even if you've been waiting for Abomination Vaults, it's still going to be a little bit longer to get it if you want to play it in 5e. Long story short, from what I gather about Abomination Vaults, from what we've learned in game and just talking to people, it's basically a mega dungeon. So, consider if you enjoy massive dungeon crawls. I'm not a huge fan of them myself, especially given the character that I wanted to play. Didn't really feel like I fit too well in a mega dungeon, but beggars can't be choosers when it comes down to this. Also, the adventure itself, and I mentioned a session 0, is on the Rules Lawyers YouTube channel. You can actually see the session 0 right here. It's like a 25-minute here video of the session 0. Also, thank you to everybody who came out and commented that you were here for me and all that stuff in the comments. The entirety of the session 0, as well as the play sessions themselves, can be found on the Rules Lawyer Patreon page. If you'd like to go check that out, you're more than welcome to. So let's talk. And I also have a character here, which we can go through a little bit if you want to. Again, this might be more for the Pathfinder fans. Maybe I'll just put a link in the description to this character sheet. If you guys want to go check it out, you could just do that instead. But a lot of people thought, and I kind of see why, that I would really enjoy Pathfinder 2e over 5e for a majority of reasons. The main being, I started playing with D&D 3.5, and I often lament how I miss, and I'm nostalgic for D&D 3.5, and I was never turned off by any of the what people might consider, minutia or clunkiness of D&D 3.5. For example, I loved making character builds by sifting through hundreds of different books and Dragon magazine articles and coming up with all sorts of weird interactions with different feats and subclass features or prestige class features and all this other kind of stuff. I really like that. And Pathfinder has a lot more of that kind of level of options and rules and crunch compared to 5e, which is pretty rules light by comparison. And if you're playing 5e and you're like, it's not rules light, well, trust me, it is. Now, I never got a chance to play Pathfinder 1e, and obviously I just jumped into 2e for the first time. And, I've looked at it, and there's a couple of things I will say right off the bat that I commend, and then there are other things that I think are just kind of excessive. And I notice some things like, for example, it's 3-action economy, which I'll talk about here in a second. I very much enjoy. I think I think that's one thing that is handled, I think, pretty well in the way it's handled. The way, say, but there is just like an overabundance of actions and names for different things you can do and stuff like that. And that could definitely bog down newer players or people that are trying to come over here from 5e might get turned off by that. But you might like the fact that there's only fortitude, reflex, and will saving throws. Basically, dexterity, constitution, and wisdom saving throws, not a saving throw for every ability score. Also, there are, maybe I can't tell if there's actually more or less skills, but they're about the same and easy enough to understand what they could be. They also have a little bit of an easier concept where you can. I felt like it fits more like with things that I've talked about and I've enjoyed with 3.5, which was the concept of, right now in 5th edition, you basically are proficient in a skill or not, and very few classes have access to something like expertise that doubles your proficiency, that shows you're real, real good at it. Well, the skill system here in Pathfinder is kind of on a untrained, trained, expert, master, legendary kind of tiers, and then things will kind of shift as you level up. So even if you were not like the best or like inertly trained in a specific skill, you have opportunities to get proficiency in that skill relatively easily, and then also have the opportunity to increase your proficiency within that skill just kind of through hard work of leveling, which I do also enjoy, right? So that means just like, well, I'm not proficient in perception, and I never will be because of the hard mechanics of 5e without me taking a feat or some other thing specifically. It's like, no, at some point I'm going to get an opportunity to get a skill increase, or maybe I could take a feat of some kind and do that. The other thing Pathfinder is a huge fan of are feats. Feats are basically all abilities in the game are considered feats, right? You're not really getting a sub or a class feature, you're getting a class feat, a heritage feat, an ancestry feat, a general feat. All these different kinds of things. They're all classified as feats, so that's kind of how you'll get different abilities and you'll see different interactions with different kinds of feats as you go ahead and level up. Just trying to think of other things kind of right off the bat. Let's see. You do get a lot more. We're playing with like standard stats, which no rolling of ability scores, but you don't really need it. Some of you might be like, oh, I won't play in a game that has like a standard array because I like rolling for ability scores because I like to have my stats be like super OP or whatever. Well, here's the thing. Um, you don't really need to do that because you're going to get so many different ability score boosts just from, what you get here as far as just being whatever class and race you are. Um, because it gives you uh like the opportunity to level so many of them up. So if we were to go ahead and go back to my character, another thing I did want to say is we are playing this in Foundry Virtual Tabletop. And I do think because of the sort of mechanical nature of Pathfinder, a true virtual tabletop will really definitely be more useful than trying to do it theater of the mind. Not saying you can't do that, but something to consider. I'm also learning Foundry for the first time in this game, which has been definitely had a learning curve for sure. I also invested in buying a license here to Path Builder, which is the character creation screen you see in front of you. And I think this was a huge help for someone like me as a new player because it just congregates all of the different aspects of Pathfinder 2e. So it's definitely worth the investment. I think it was like $7 or something. Definitely worth the time and effort to pick this up because it'll make building a character so much easier when you have basically the entirety of the game system available to you. So if you were to look here, you'll see my ability scores, right? You'll see the numbers, the modifiers, as opposed to the score themselves, right? So 12, 16, 12, 12, 18, 10 are my ability scores from strength to charisma there. And if you'll look, when I go to, say, set my abilities over here, my starting stats were all 10. My ancestry, which is, again, in this particular instance, a human, gives me a bonus to wisdom and dexterity, which is a +2 to each. My background gives me a +2. Usually, most of these will either, for example, a human gets a +2 to any 2 abilities. Your background will usually give you one free one that you can kind of pick from, like this, or one that one that gives you an option of 2, for example, Constitution or Wisdom. And then your class will usually give you a boost to your ability score, that's the primary ability score of your class. Again, me playing a druid here, that would be wisdom. And then you also get 4 free boosts, which are boost an ability score by 2. So as you can see, I was able to start with 12, 12, or 12, sorry, 12, 14, 12, 12, 18, 10 as my ability scores. And I obviously could have some be higher than others if I'd wanted to, 18 kind of being the highest you could get. But I was able to do that just right out the gate without having to do anything funky. That's just innately part of the class and the builds. This is all at level 1. So you may not need to roll stats. And then again, you'll also get different things, which we'll talk about here. But basically, the other thing I've seen and kind of been told by the other players and the GM in the game is anything that's listed as common in the game, basically you're free to take. Things that are listed as uncommon or rare is essentially just run it by your GM, and if they tell you it's okay, you can play it. That's essentially my understanding of how that works, because there are uncommon and rare spells, uncommon and rare feats and abilities and races and things like that, or ancestries. And then again, as you can see, as you level up, you're going to get a heritage feat, possibly an ancestry feat, possible other general feats, a skill, skill proficiencies. You'll get to choose possibly kind of like subclasses within your class and things like that. So I said I was going to come back to the 3-action economy. And I think the best thing to do is to look at the action list, which is probably going to be a little confusing because as you can see, there are a ton of actions that you can perform in this game, which is what I said could possibly be a turnoff to, newer players or D&D 5e converts. But basically, if you see this symbol here, this kind of 1 diamond, if you will, that is 1 action. If you were to scroll down and see something like 2, that's 2 actions, and obviously 3 would be 3 actions. And the main thing there is that's kind of how your everything works on a turn. Also, this kind of arrow here is a reaction, which obviously can happen on somebody else's turn. And if it's kind of an empty looking one like this, that's a free action. Give you some breakdown, right? So normally in 5e, you get an action and a bonus action on a turn. You get a free move. And that's not really the case in Pathfinder. You get 3 actions. Moving, it's called striding. That's an action. Making an attack, striking as it's called in Pathfinder, is an action. But you have 3 actions on a turn. So if you happen to be in a spot where there's a bunch of enemies around you and you don't need to do anything other than attack, you could make 3 strikes in a turn by using your 3 actions to do so. Now, spells usually vary in the action that they use. Typically, an offensive attacking spell utilizes 2 actions, whereas a kind of utility or other kind of spell might use only 1. And then you need to kind of figure out what you're going to do on your turn. So if I were to look at it with spells, you can see a lot of the cantrips that I have here, all of the cantrips that I have here. By the way, cantrips work the same way in 5e as they do in Pathfinder 2e. They're kind of an unlimited resource that you have. These are kind of all, most of these are attacking, even though light is kind of an utility. They use 2 actions. And as I mentioned before, here's the sort of trained, expert, master, legendary. And as you level up, your kind of proficiency within your own spellcasting ability will increase. And you'll see that this will change. They'll also determine what your spell save DC and your spell attack roll are. The other thing you'll see down here is like Briny Bolt is an offensive one, but Heal has a variable cost of 1 to 3 actions. Now, another thing you might notice is you have to prepare the number of spells you want, and I personally don't like this at all. You have to prepare the number of spells you want of a specific spell type. Now, this is where 5e is sort of the outlier here. This is how it was back in 3.5. If you wanted to have 3 cure wounds, you need to prepare 2 cure wounds. So basically the way this works is I have 2 heals prepared and a Briny Bolt, which Briny Bolt, again, is an offensive kind of attacking spell. If I want to heal somebody, I can cast heal, and then that heal spell is gone. I've used that one for the day. If I didn't prepare a secondary heal, I'd have no other heals available for that day from the point of casting that. It's not like 5e where you pick one spell and you have 3 spell slots and you can cast it 3 times. It doesn't work like that. which is, again, something I think that was pretty an elegant change, in my opinion, to 5e that I very much enjoy. Take a little time to understand that here in Pathfinder. I didn't know that in the first session. Nobody told me that. Because I went in 100% blind and kind of learned on the fly as we were playing, not like reading up on things ahead of time. I went in totally blind with a character made here, and I had 3 different spells at level 1, not realizing that I needed to pick 3 heals if I wanted to heal 3 times. But another thing that's worth mentioning is I told you there was a variable action cost. So it says casts 1 to 3 actions. It also works kind of like 3-5, where healing heals characters but also harms undead. So any healing spell you have can also be an offensive spell towards undead creatures. So I can either heal a living creature a d8 hit points, or target an undead creature and it gets a fortitude save, and if it fails, it's going to take a d8. I forget what kind of damage it is, but like of negative or heal positive energy, whatever it is, it's going to take damage. You can see for 1 action, it has a somatic component, meaning you don't speak, you only use your hand gestures, and you touch somebody, so it's a range of touch. If you go, and this is something I do like, if you go for 2 actions, it adds an additional component. It's verbal and somatic, but the range changes to 30 feet as opposed to just being a touch spell. Also, if it's because of my abilities and things, if it's a living creature, I increase the hit point restored by 8. So that goes to a d8 plus 8 hit points, and I can now do it at range. Or if I go up and bump it up to a 3 action spell, I disperse positive energy in a 30-foot emanation. This targets all living creatures and all undead creatures in a burst, and everybody within 30 feet gets all living and undead creatures would get that extra d8. Now, I don't believe, and this is something I'd have to check, and you guys can obviously correct me in the comments, that I think this just works on other characters as well. Like, so if we're around and fighting living creatures, I think I don't get to choose. I think I just heal them. I don't think I get to target who gets the healing. And then you'll also see heightened here, right? So this is if you have like a higher level spell slot and want to prepare to cast it out of that, I believe. Or that heightened might be when you level up, but it says the amount of healing or damage increases by a d8, and the extra healing for the 2 action version increases by 8. So you can really stack this up to build it up. I am playing a druid in this because this is the first time I felt like I could play a druid and do a relatively decent job of replicating my D&D 3.5e character. For those of you who know, I've been doing my sort of going back in nostalgia trip through my original campaign, and as such, I never played a druid in 5e because I didn't think I could do a good enough job replicating my 3.5 character, because 5e just doesn't allow for that. And I feel like here in Pathfinder, I stand a pretty good chance to do so. So that's kind of just like a high-level overview of some of the main things I've noticed. I have noticed things like dexterity. This is another clunk that I think carried over from 3.5 that I don't particularly enjoy, which is like ranged weapons use dexterity for attacking, but strength for damaging. So, like, if you want to shoot somebody with a bow, dexterity is required to hit them. And then maybe there's feats or abilities that allow you to get around this. There were a couple, I think, back in 3.5. But you would never be able to do your dexterity bonus in damage with that. You'd have to, so as you can see here, I have a throwing knife that I'm throwing. I have a +7 to hit, which comes from my dexterity, right? But my damage is only a d4 +1 because my strength modifier is a +1, so I deal strength in damage. You'll also notice these 3 numbers here where it says +7, +3, -1. Your subsequent attacks on a turn, if you were in a situation where you would strike 3 times, each one sort of takes a bone or a negative to the attack roll. So it's not just like you're swinging 3 times perfectly. It's each one is subsequently a little bit harder to hit than previous. And this is kind of what we saw back almost like in a 3.5 situation with base attack bonus, where, your first attack would be the strongest and then subsequent attacks would be slightly less chance to hit. And we see that here again carried over in Pathfinder. Again, we have simple weapons, martial weapons, and advanced weapons. Pretty much, I think everybody is trained in unarmed attacks, but like this is how like trained in simple weapons and unarmed attacks. Whereas like a monk might be an expert in unarmed attacks, and that allows them to do more things. And that's kind of again the sort of elegantness of the different system of again trained, expert, master, and legendary. There's also a lot more focus, I'd say, on medicine checks because you can do things like outside of combat, you can do things like treat wounds, for example. If I were to go down here, treat wounds with medicine, it says you spend 10 minutes tending on one injured living creature. The target is temporarily immune to treat wounds for an hour, which means you can only do it so often. You make a medicine check that's usually 15. And then if you succeed, you heal them for an amount. It says if you're an expert in medicine, you can attempt to increase it. You increase it as you go. If you succeed, the target heals 2d8 hit points and the wounded condition is removed. If you critical, they heal 48 hit points, but if you also crit fail, which you can crit fail skills in this game, which has a negative side effect, but you also can crit succeed skills. If you crit fail, you actually deal damage to the target. And then I also have a feat here called Field Medic, or my background is Field Medic, which gives me a thing called Battle Medicine, which allows me to attempt a medicine check in combat as an action to try to heal. So in addition to heal spells, I also have the opportunity to heal people in combat using a treat wounds kind of thing within combat as an action. And it says the target is then temporarily immune to your battle medicine for 1 day, which is interesting because this means that anybody in the game can technically get access to battle medicine at feat from a variety of different options. So anybody can have some degree of healing if they want, whether you're a martial or a caster. And I've kind of surrogately found myself as the healer, which I have no problem doing. That works for me. But I also recognize we didn't have a healer, so I thought I would jump in and kind of take that role. We do have some other healing, but you get the point. That's something that I do appreciate, that there are a lot of different things that feats in this game can fundamentally change the way you play things by allowing unique interactions like that. Another thing that we're playing with is, they called it basically like gradual ability boosts. So remember how I told you would boost an ability by +2, at the beginning? Normally what happens is when you hit level 5 in Pathfinder, you get like 4 ability boosts. Bam, all at once. And you can bump 4 things up by a +2, right? If it's 18, by the way, if your ability score is 18, an ability boost only boosts it up by 1. So whereas for everything else that's below 18, you'd boost it up by 2. If it's something that's already at 18, you'd boost it up to 19, and then when an opportunity presents itself later on, you could boost it up to 20. We are playing with something called gradual ability boosts, which instead of getting them all at once at, every 5 levels, you kind of get them gradually each level. You get 1 ability boost each level as opposed to just bam all at once. So, for example, here at level 2, I took plus to dexterity, and then at 3, I took to constitution. At 4, I think I took intelligence. Yeah. And then at 5, I took constitution, or wisdom rather, which put me up to 19, because I knew at the next ability boost, I would be able to bump my wisdom to 20, which would be not normally the max. You actually can go past that in Pathfinder. But the gradual ability boost only covers the first 5 levels, so it's a gradual thing, and then it kind of goes back to its normal cadence past level 5. Now, another thing we're playing with is this thing called the free archetype kind of system, which basically gives you almost free multi-classing. I'm not entirely sure why we're doing it. I just know that it's a thing that exists. So we are. And I use this. You can use this kind of augment to kind of multi-class out into other abilities to try different unique things. You can do this within your own class to get other class features. I took the Beastmaster archetype, or Beastmaster dedication, which basically gives me an animal companion. And that allowed me to not have to take animal companion related stuff as the base druid, so I could focus on spellcasting and dealing damage and stuff in that aspect by taking the storm order druid, which gave me like lightning magic. And then I could also have a pet. So Bob the crocodile has returned in this game, and he's been doing work in it, let me tell you. We can go ahead and see. Here's, his stats right now. He's got, jaws and a tail attack. And I also really like the way they handle pets in Pathfinder. I'm able to just say, let me use an action to command my animal companion, and he goes off and does things. And he gets 2 actions, so he can move and attack. Again, if he's in a situation where he can attack twice, he can attack twice. He can move twice to get himself into position to possibly provide flanking or something like that. And I really enjoy it because now I have a thing that I can do. So like if I cast a spell for 2 actions, I can use my 3rd action to command him to go do something. Obviously, there's an opportunity for me to do stuff, but I think the more fun one-off, one-action abilities you have, or sometimes as I see them being called the 3rd action, you do a thing, and then you have that 3rd action that's just kind of hanging out there. What can you do with it? You come up with a cool thing to do, and having the pet is pretty cool. Because originally I built my character to have 2 animal companions. I was really jazzed about that, but then I realized you could only have one out at a time, so it kind of defeated the purpose. You had to you could have 2 animal companions to swap them. I could have had a familiar and an animal companion, but I think I'm fine with just the animal companion. So how do I feel about the game that we've been in so far? Like I said, it's a mega dungeon and I'm playing a druid. I don't there has been a little bit of outdoorsy swamp related stuff, so I feel like my character could do well. Again, healing has been a huge part of being able to just provide heals, whether from battle medicine or from the heal spell. That definitely felt very powerful about that, and my healing does feel very strong, which is something that I feel like depending on how you do it in 5e, your healing can feel very, very weak. So I do appreciate that. Another thing is you don't automatically heal yourself to full when you take a rest in Pathfinder. I'll be honest with you, it's kind of been such a blur. I don't actually know how much healing you get back when you take a rest. Because I feel like anytime we got super beat up or ran out of stuff, we would just leave the dungeon and go back to town. So if that's the case and it's easy enough to just leave the dungeon and go back to town, we can rest as long as we need to recuperate before we want to come back into the dungeon. So again, that might just be the nature of the game I'm playing in or the group I'm with, but I still don't really know. I know you don't heal to full automatically. You do get your spell slots and stuff back, but you don't automatically heal to full. So, in theory, if you're in a situation where you're kind of attritioning, your health, you might not get it all back on a long rest. So healing or other means of outside of combat healing, like treating wounds, might become a very useful option. I also like that I could focus so heavily on medicine and the different feats that apply to medicine that I could just become the ultimate healer in a lot of ways. There's a feat I took called Assurance that essentially lets you at a certain point just auto succeed at the lowest level on an ability, which I thought was pretty cool. So I think, I took Assurance Medicine. So eventually there'll be a point where I go to make those treat wounds medicine checks and they'll just succeed without me having to risk the opportunity of potentially crit failing and hurting somebody. There's things you can do to expand the amount of people you could heal, what other things you can do with it, stuff like that, which I very much enjoy. And if I were to show you, say we were to go to, I don't know, here we have a general feat, you'll see how these have numbers, right? So this is the level that you can access those feats. If they're kind of in the golden color, that means they're an uncommon one. So it might, again, come down to whether the GM lets you have them. But you can see 3, and if you scroll up or down, you'll see some of these. Here's a rare one, right? They go all the way up to level 15. Some of these feats you have to be level 15. But then some of them will be you also have to have legendary ranks within the skill itself to be able to access it, and you might have to have subsequent prerequisite other feats as well. So the concept of feat chaining and stuff like that is definitely present in Pathfinder, or if you want to access a certain thing, you're probably going to need to take other feats ahead of time and plan things out. And that's also another thing I really like about Path Builder. I basically have my entire character planned out all the way to level 20. Although there's a couple of things I have to adjust because I made some changes later on. But like, I mean, yeah, my whole level 1 to 20 character is essentially present here. Um, and I could go ahead and just be done like with my character. And then as I level up, I don't even have to think about what to do other than like maybe choosing spells. I'm ready to go. And I'll actually put a link in the description to my character sheet here if you'd like to go ahead and play around. It's just as easy as clicking on the level here and changing what level the character is, and you'll see all of the stats jump up accordingly. Um, but yeah, like I said, all in all, I've had 2 sessions, and honestly, the first session was a lot of getting to know the characters and kind of developing um, the characters' interactions and how they were going to go about stuff. So I didn't really get to do too much in the way of encounters, and it's a mega dungeon, so it's basically going to be go into a room, see if there's bad guys in the room, fight the bad guys. Did we die? Leave and go back. Like, so in that aspect, I don't know if I'm getting a true overall overarching understanding of Pathfinder because again, we're in a very tight, sort of tight area. But we also did have almost a pretty deadly encounter in our first combat, which I think actually at this time potentially the rules lawyer is actually going to have a video on that actual encounter on his channel. So if you want to see kind of the first major encounter my party interacted with, you can go ahead and check that video out. I'll have a link in the video description if you want to go check that out for yourself as well. Once it becomes available. I don't know when this video is going to come out versus when his video comes out, so just consider that. But yeah, like I said, the biggest thing is I haven't really had too much. In the second campaign, we had a different player in that we had previously. So we spent a lot of the time catching that new character up and also just kind of getting to know each other because not every player at the table knew each other. So I don't know, maybe in the next session, if I'm able to play in it, because it kind of bounces around time frame wise, if I'm in the next session, perhaps then we'll be able to really get into it and grind it out and get to see some stuff and like really figure out how the different abilities and different things interact. One thing I will say I was just thinking about as I was talking through it, unless your GM has really allowed some wonky stuff, like my character that I showed you here, if other GMs at other tables, whether it be you guys on the internet running a game for me or somebody else, if you do gradual ability boosts and you do the free archetype system, I can just take this character to anybody else's table. I don't have any unique magic items. I don't have any funky, unique, rare stuff. My character's built entirely on the common options. And I don't have funky magic or anything like that. I think the most is I had like 30 gold to start was like the most rare thing that I had. But for the most part, one of the nice benefits of not having to roll stats and having this kind of uncommon, rare, common sets of like the way you choose feats and things, essentially, the way I built my character at this table is really no different than I could probably end up building them at your table minus any house rules you have. And if you just have an availability for a second level druid at your table, I could just bring this character and port him right over. As long as, like I said, you use the free archetype system and gradual ability boosts, which from what I gather from a lot of people is kind of just the common thing a lot of people do. So that's actually kind of a nice thing. Whereas, if you're playing D&D, obviously you could just build your character with the standard array, but other people might just be like, well, I don't allow, Tasha's Cauldron stuff, or I don't allow this, that, the other thing, which I guess could still happen in Pathfinder, but when so much of it's available for free, I feel like people are a little more accepting. Like I might be able to take this character straight into a Pathfinder Society game, potentially. I don't know, because I don't know what the parameters of that are, but all in all, I think I'm enjoying the game so far. I would like longer play sessions that were actually just playing the game, so I could get a little bit better of it. But like I said, I think I'm missing out entirely in kind of like almost the exploration. Like when I think of exploration, I don't think of exploring a dungeon. I think of like exploring overland terrain and mountains and forests and ancient ruins and stuff like that. That's what I consider exploration. Also, the fact that we're in a mega dungeon isn't really going to give us too much of the social aspect of diplomacy and dealing with things like that. My character is like Florida man, nature druid who loves alligators and crocodiles. He's not really the social type at all, but which, funnily enough, has basically become his entire character concept. and is a running joke in the game that I can only use field medicine to heal myself and my alligator. Anytime I try to heal a human, I almost kill them because apparently I only understand reptilian anatomy and not, more humanoid anatomy. But which is a fun little running joke that we have. Because I keep failing those medicine checks on all the party members. But yeah, like I said, I would like to explore a little bit more of the overworld and kind of get an idea of, like, I don't really know much about the Pathfinder world either. So there's just a little bit of stuff, like I said, I'd like to get a better understanding of. But really, it'll just come down to time in the game. And I am committed to play this. This game really only meets every other week. But again, like I said, because there's so many people involved, the date that it happens and the time that it happens kind of shifts. So I can't guarantee, like, if the session happens again on like a random Tuesday, I'm not going to be able to sit down and play that game. So I'm going to miss out on what happened, which means the next time that I come back, we're going to have to explain to me what happens, and we're going to lose time that way. And that's, in my opinion, really unfortunate, because we're only going to get so much time in the game. And that's just a bummer, right? But that's just the nature of it is, right? Beggars can't be choosers when you want to play a game like this. So I don't know. I feel like that was a lot of rambling. It's almost a 40-minute ramble here, so I think I'm going to end it there. I hope I got my point across that, again, I am enjoying Pathfinder, so, good job, Paizo, in that respect. I think if you love 5e, probably still keep playing 5e, maybe give it a try, but it might not be for you because of just the amount of mechanical crunch that's there. And again, like I said, I think there is some holdover clunk from D&D 3.5, the strength dex for weapons situation. I personally prefer 5e's spell system a lot better as well, but either way. And like I said, I will have links in the description to the Rules Lawyer's more recent video about that encounter if it's out, or it will be in the video description once it is out. Video about the Pathfinder, our first session 0, that'll be in the description as well, along with a link to his Patreon if you want to see the actual gameplay. I'll have a link to the Abomination Vault page from the Paizo store, as well as my character sheet on Path Builder, so you can go ahead and see what I was going to pick all the way up to level 20. So, anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.